Good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 311 of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where we've already shared a wafer of Limbus.
But we have plenty of water, so no parched mouths here. Folks, pull up a bench in the common room and join us. I'm Matt, the Nerd of the Rings, and I'm here with the Man of the West, who would be perfectly content to let me drink first, Alan Sisto.
Well, that's right. You never know in case it's poisonous, right? Well, folks, join us as Sam waves high to Eärendil in the second part of The Land of Shadow, Chapter 2 of Book 6 of The Lord of the Rings.
Folks, no matter how you got here, you're all welcome here in the common room. Here at the Prancing Pony Podcast, we are reading and talking our way through Middle-earth with plenty of speculation and bad jokes along the way.
That's right. Now, we love deep dives into the lore, discussing our favorite themes, and a whole lot more.
But we do try to keep it light and fun, like a couple of friends chatting at the pub, and we're glad you've joined us.
And I'm sure you'll be glad you joined as well. But before we get to tonight's chapter discussion, it's time to welcome an old friend to the common room. That can only mean one thing. It's time for fan favorite Philology Fair. And Sean, what do you have for us tonight?
Well, Alan, tonight we're going to take a look at one of my favorite names in all of Middle-earth.
Eärendil?
No. One of my other favorite names.
Okay, all right.
And certainly my favorite in Mordor. And that's the name of the pass into the plateau of Gorgoroth from the northwest, called Carach Angren. Now, this is translated as the Jaws of Iron in Westron, or Isenmouth. Or Eisenmouth. We'll talk about that in a moment. And we actually mentioned this name really briefly back in episode 197. We did Philology Fair on the etymology of Isengard, which is also called Angrenost. And you can kind of hear the same words for iron in that name, both the Old English word for iron, Isen or Eisen, and the Sindarin word, Angren.
And just like we did in that earlier Philology Fair, we're going to start by looking at Tolkien's nomenclature. That's where Tolkien explains that, like Isengard, Eisenmouth, or Isenmouth, now it's going to just mess me up forever to read Isengard.
Now we're just going to be thrown off every time we say it. Yeah, no.
I know. What am I supposed to seriously? Does Saruman live in Isengard now? I don't know. I'm going to still call it Isengard. So Eisenmouth, it is intended to represent a translation into the common speech of an Elvish name. In this case, the name you mentioned earlier, Carach Angren. Tolkien goes on to say, made it so early a date that at the period of the tale, it had become archaic in form, and its original meaning was obscured. So even though Eisenmouth is Old English, it isn't meant to represent the language of the Rohirrim here, which is different from Isengard in this case. In fact, here it's used
actually
to
it is the same as Isengard.
It is the same as Isengard. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Both of them were archaic Westron because the idea is that the Dunedain named them so long ago.
Okay. Well, I get that. I just didn't know that that Isengard was like that too. I thought there was a difference because Isengard was so close to Rohan. It made sense that it would have had a name in the Rohirric language.
I remember thinking that too, but as I was looking at the notes for 197, we determined that it was because it was also an archaic Westron name.
It makes sense. It's just annoying that I was wrong.
I know it's annoying. That's why I'm telling you, so you can go back.
I know.
And fix it.
No, I like it. I like it very much. So here, of course, it is used to represent a name that was translated long ago by people speaking, as you said, that archaic form of Westron, which I suppose that makes sense in that they're speaking an old version of it, and the Rohirrim are speaking that old version too, because they are a more primitive people, and they're speaking that older language. Okay, I get you.
But as we'll see, there's a little bit of a difference in the way the Rohirrim would probably say that versus the archaic Westron form, and I'll get to that in a moment.
Okay.
First of all, let's go back to the nomenclature for a moment, because in that, Tolkien also says that Isen or Eisen is an old variant form in English of iron. Mouth, with an E here, is a derivative of mouth without an E, representing Old English mutha from muth, mouth, or opening. In Tolkien's note, he goes on to say that this is especially used of the mouths of rivers, but also applied to other openings, not parts of a body.
Okay.
Now, let's get this pronunciation thing.
Yeah, come on, let's solve it.
We're saying the word twice.
You're leaving me on tenterhooks about this pronunciation thing, Sean. You're killing me. All right.
I know, I'm sorry. Okay, so in Old English, Isen was probably pronounced like that. It was probably Isen. Tolkien tended to pronounce it Eisen in Isengard. We can actually hear recordings of him saying Isengard, which is why I think it's perfectly acceptable to say Isengard. For Isenmouth or Eisenmouth, I don't know. Take your pick. I probably will say Eisenmouth just because it looks like Isengard. But if I were really trying to pronounce this in Old English, it would probably be something like Isenmouth or Isenmutha, probably.
Isenmutha. Yeah, because it's from Old English Mutha.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, going back to Isen, the original form of the word Isen, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, was actually Isern. Isern. This is from a Germanic word of uncertain origins, but it's probably rooted in an old Celtic word and probably even some earlier Indo-European roots that mean either strong or holy, which would probably be because iron was a very strong metal and would have very important value in society. Or it might actually be from a root that means blood, which would probably be a reference to the color of iron when it rusts, right?
Yeah.
In West Saxon dialects of Old English, so in the western part, the western southern kind of West Saxon part of England, Isern actually became Isen, which is the form we see here.
Right.
But in Mercian dialects, which is sort of in the central part of England, the S actually changed into an R and became Iren, Iren.
Huh.
Now, this is what takes me back to the whole thing of how the Rohirrim would say this versus like the ancient Dunedain, because Tolkien tended to favor Mercian forms when he was representing the language of the Rohirrim. And so if this had been a Rohirrim coinage, it probably would have been Irenmutha or Irengard.
Yeah, Irengard and Irenmutha. That makes sense.
Right.
Okay. And that is why we stated in that earlier episode that Tolkien may have chosen the West Saxon form Isen, or Isen, in Isengard and Eisenmouth, because these words were not Rohirric names, but, as I obviously forgot, names established by the Dunedain near the end of the Second Age.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the fun stuff about Isen or Eisen. Now, as for mouth or Mutha, I don't know. I'm just going to say mouth because it's easier. I mean, it's basically just the word for mouth with an E at the end of it. No major surprises there. Although when I was looking at the history of this word in the Oxford English Dictionary, I did see something that was kind of interesting about the etymology of mouth, if you're a word nerd like I am.
Aren't we all? Yeah.
I hope so. I hope I've had that influence.
By now, anybody listening to the show is a full-blooded word nerd.
I hope so. But yeah, mouth does actually have kind of an interesting history. It was actually inherited into English from Germanic roots, not surprisingly.
Right.
And it has cognates in German, Dutch, Icelandic, Swedish, Danish, a whole bunch of Scandinavian languages.
A lot of other languages with Germanic roots, yeah.
Right, exactly. But it may also be cognate with a Latin word mentum, which actually means chin. And this is the same root that gives us the min in some Latin-derived words in English for things that project or stand out. So think about words like prominent or eminent. These are words for things that stand out.
Interesting. Like a chin.
Yeah, exactly. And you could actually use these together. You could say somebody has a prominent chin, right? But these words with this min that came from Latin, they actually come from this word that means chin. So I don't know. I thought that was kind of fascinating, especially because we're using the word mouth here to refer metaphorically to something that's an opening, right? A pass in the mountains in Mordor. But the original sense of mouth may actually have had more to do with where it is on the face, the fact that it's close to the chin, than the fact that it's an opening in the face. So I just thought that was fascinating.
Okay. Well, of course, it wasn't long before mouth had a metaphorical sense in Old English of an opening into something other than a face. We have references to the word muth, meaning the opening of a bag in early Old English translations of the book of Genesis, and in the sense of a river mouth, as Tolkien points out, in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle of the 9th century.
That's right. Okay, so that's enough about the Old English name, Eisenmouth. Let's talk about that Sindarin name, because we haven't even gotten to that one yet. Carach Angren. So let's talk about this one. Now, obviously, we can see a connection between the word Angren, which means iron, and other names we've seen, particularly, think back to Season 1 in the Silmarillion. We've got a lot of words for things that are made of iron, like Anglikel. That's the sword of meteoric iron that became Turin's sword Gurthang.
Which also has an A-N-G in it, Gurthang.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Gurthang also has an A&G for iron. You've got Morgoth's Fortress of Angband, of course, which means the Iron Prison or the Iron Hell or Hell of Iron. All of these names come from the Elvish word for iron, which is Anga in Quenya and Ang in Sindarin. The other word nerds out there are probably going to call me out if I don't mention that Anga is also the name of the 7th letter in the Tangor script. But
okay, now you're going too deep even for
now
me.
we're
That's
just
like
digressing.
27th level word nerd. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. In Parma Eldolambron number 17, Tolkien glosses this particular form of the word, angren, as meaning specifically of iron. So that ren suffix must be an adjective form of some kind.
Okay, that makes sense. I especially like the idea that this name, Carach Angren, connects back linguistically to Angband, Morgoth's fortress in the north of Middle-earth, partly because, Mordor, right? I mean, it's a fortress in the north. Well, it's not in the north of Middle-earth.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose it technically is. It's above the equator, so somewhere in the north, to north half.
North, yeah. But it's an evil place, right? It makes sense that it would tie back to Morgoth.
Yeah. But also because Carach Angren connects to the valley of Udun, which itself is named after the Sindarin form of the name of Morgoth's original fortress in the First Age, Utumno. And
that's right.
For that, I actually want to call back to Gandalf facing off against the Balrog, where he calls him Flame of Udun. Now, in that case, he's actually referencing that First Age hell and not this valley in northwest Mordor.
That's right. He's calling him Flame of Utumno or Flame of Hell, not Flame of the Valley in
that
Mordor.
Valley between the Morannon and the Carach Angren.
Which is a scary place. Not as scary a place as the original Utumno. Yeah.
No, not much is. Yeah.
No. All right. So that's Angren. Now let's talk about the first word in the Sindarin name, which is Carach, meaning jaws. We don't have quite as much to say about this word. There's not a ton in the material on it, but we do know that it's ultimately from... Oh, well done.
I was wondering when you'd pick up on that.
So subtle.
Wasn't it?
Yeah. It was. And just like in the movie, it just like gradually kind of builds. And dun, dun, dun. Yeah, it's ultimately from a primitive Quendian root, karak, which means sharp fang or spike or tooth. It's got cognate forms like Quenya karka, which means fang. And if you look at the early Gnomish lexicon, there's a word kark, which means jag or point or fang.
Which would be then also the same root for Carcharoth.
That's right. Yes, absolutely right.
Fascinating. See, my word nerd skills are getting a little better.
No, that's
Sean.
good. That you picked up on that one. I didn't even think about that one. That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Cool.
And now I want to go and double check, what does Carcharoth's name actually mean? It's got to be something jaws, right?
I know. Now I think it's the red maw, isn't it? Or is that no, that's his father Draugluin.
No, I think you're right.
No, you're right. Carcharoth, because Roth is red.
Yeah. It is the red maw, and it is related to Karak, meaning jaw, because referring to his red fangs, because he's always eating very rare meat.
By rare, we mean totally uncooked.
And living.
Elf tartare.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, we should point out, by the way, that Kark, in that sense, the early Gnomish lexicon, which is just C-A-R-C, that is not the same as the name of the raven Kark in The Hobbit, which, according to Douglas Anderson, is most likely just an onomatopoeic name imitating the caw of a raven.
Yeah, that makes sense. Caw.
Right.
And also, sadly, Alan has already kind of winked at us. Karak or jaws does not appear to be related in any way to any Sindarin word for a shark.
That's too bad.
But we probably ought to wrap this up soon, or we're going to need a bigger podcast.
Oh, no. Wow. Wow. You got me, Sean. Good job. Thanks for joining me today, man.
Thanks, Alan.
It's always great to hear Sean's voice again.
Indeed.
But for tonight, let's go ahead and get into our discussion. Alan, do you want to start us off?
Indeed, I will. Sharing a wafer of lembas and munching it as best they could with their parched mouths, Frodo and Sam plodded on. The light, though no more than a gray dusk, was now enough for them to see that they were deep in the valley between the mountains. It sloped up gently northward, and at its bottom went the bed of a now dry and withered stream. Beyond its stony course, they saw a beaten path that wound its way under the feet of the westward cliffs. Had they known, they could have reached it quicker, for it was a track that left the main Morgul road at the western bridge end and went down by a long stair cut in the rock to the valley's bottom. It was used by patrols or by messengers going swiftly to lesser posts and strongholds north away, between Cirith and the narrows of Eisenmouth, the iron jaws of Carach Angren. It was perilous for the hobbits to use such a path, but they needed speed, and Frodo felt that he could not face the toil of scrambling among the boulders or in the trackless glens of the Morgai, and he judged that northward was, maybe, the way that their hunters would least expect them to take. The road east to the plain, or the pass back westward, those they would first search most thoroughly. Only when he was well north of the tower did he mean to turn and seek for some way to take him east on the last desperate stage of his journey. So now they crossed the stony bed and took to the Orc path, and for some time they marched along it. The cliffs at their left were overhung, and they could not be seen from above, but the path made many bends, and at each bend they gripped their sword hilts and went forward cautiously. The light grew no stronger, for Orodruin was still belching forth a great fume that, beaten upwards by the opposing airs, mounted higher and higher until it reached a region above the wind and spread in an immeasurable roof, whose central pillar rose out of the shadows beyond their view. They had trudged for more than an hour when they heard a sound that brought them to a halt. Unbelievable, but unmistakable. Water trickling. And we'll stop there.
Now, we picked up right where we left off last week, and Frodo and Sam share a piece of the elvish waybread.
That's right. I mean, it's hard to do when you're thirsty, I imagine.
Yeah.
Look, this isn't cram, but it is still bread. So,
yeah,
it's going to suck up any moisture that they might still have in their mouths.
Yeah.
This could not be easy when you don't have any water.
And now, nourished enough for the day, as Lambus does, they keep on moving, and they're able to see, now that there's a little light, that they're in a deep valley between the inner and outer ranges of Mordor, those being the Ethel Duath and the Morgai.
That's right. Now, what they do notice, though, is that the valley slopes up a bit as they head to the north. They're traveling along a dry stream bed, and on the other side of that creek bed, they see a pathway.
Yeah, it turns out that they could have gotten here quicker had they known about it. The path left the road before the bridge that they had to drop off of last week. But to be fair to them, they were a little busy running from a screaming Nazgul at the time to notice.
That's true.
This.
And the crumbling wall and the terrifying watchers. And yeah. It's not a surprise that they didn't happen to spot that path. Because again, if you look at the text, it says that the path left on the western end of the bridge. So that would be the Tower of Cirith Ungol's side. Now, this pathway is actually used by orcs that are going back and forth between Cirith Ungol and the Eisenmouth, which is what Sean and I talked about in the Philology Fair earlier. That's a long run all the way up to Udun, and it looks like about 70 miles, about 110, 115 kilometers, if we go by Karen Wynn Fonstad's excellent Atlas of Middle-earth that I'll probably reference a few more times tonight.
Yeah, that's one of my all-time favorite Tolkien-related books, by the way, the Atlas of Middle-earth.
So
it's fantastic.
Useful. So useful. Yeah.
And as we'll learn later in this chapter, the road actually goes up to an orc hold called Dorthang. Not only is that a cool name, but we will talk about it when we get there. But before it reaches that fortress, there's a junction with the road that leads to the Eisenmouth.
That's right. I actually want to talk a little bit about Dorthang only because it is such a cool name. I'll just tell you right now, it means dark oppression. But the reason that it grabbed my attention is that my main character in Lord of the Rings Online is Durthal. And that just means dark helm. And so I was like, ooh, this sounds a lot like Durthal, but it's Dorthang and it's dark oppression, which is nowhere near as bad as my guy. He's actually a nice guy, just to be honest. All right. So after they turn on this road, the one that you mentioned, right, the junction with the road that leads to the Eisenmouth, they turn on that road. That's where Frodo and Sam end up. Maybe I'll hold off on that. I'm going to try to avoid all the spoilers in the world, right? But those of you who know the story know what happens when they get on that road. I will say, though, we mentioned Fonstad's Atlas a couple of times. It has a really, really helpful close-up on this northwest corner of Mordor from Cirith Ungol and Shelob's Lair all the way up to the Morannon. Really helps you get the lay of the land. And because of the perspective of that map, it even includes the eastern part of Ithilien, so you can see where Henethanoon is and where the crossroads are. And you can see, like what we talked about last week, just how far out of the way our heroes have had to go to get here. It's really funny. I mean, they're still not even as far north as where they were at Henethanoon, but they're getting closer.
Yes.
And they'll get there before too much longer. But it's like, wow, you could have gotten here in a few hours if it weren't for that massive mountain range in the way.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Now, generally speaking, a pathway in Mordor isn't going to be the best place for Frodo and Sam.
True. Yeah.
But they are in need of haste, and trudging cross-country is not an appealing prospect.
No, especially with those foot-long thorns and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, definitely in need of haste. And Frodo, and this is interesting, first of all, note how we continue with Frodo's perspective. We observed this last episode. Frodo kind of took the lead once we got out of the area where Sam knew his stuff. Frodo again takes the lead here, and we're in his perspective, and he thinks this is the least likely direction that they would be expected to go.
Yeah, either they'd head back out, job done, or they'd head east across Gorgoroth.
Right. I mean, look, I suppose south would actually have been even less likely, but, I see his point. Yeah.
And so his plan is to go north for quite some distance before finding a way east across to Mount Doom.
That's right. Spoiler, they're going to end up going the long way around. Yeah. And for good reason, right? I mean, if they were able to get over the Morgai, let's say tomorrow, March 16th, and they took 4 days to get over to the volcano, well, then we're going to have the army of the West somewhere near the crossroads at that point.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to be distracting all the timing has to work. And Tolkien does a spectacular job of lining up the timing and changing the dates from draft to draft in order to get everything to line up correctly.
The long way around. That's a theme here in these books, if you hadn't caught on yet.
That's true.
So this is a nervous time as they go north on this path.
Oh, yeah. Terrifying.
They can't be seen from anyone looking down because the cliffs are overhung, but it's not a straight road, and so every turn is reason to be nervous.
It'd be terrifying. You realize you're in totally hostile territory, and if you round that corner and there's even one orc, unless you kill him right away, everybody's going to know where you
trouble.
are.
Yeah.
And if there's a troop of orcs, a whole squad, you're toast. Yeah, this is terrifying. Now, we switch back to the environment a little bit. Yes, day is progressing, but even though it's daytime elsewhere, it's no brighter here, right? And that's because of the volcano. It's spewing this smoke that keeps climbing and then spreading out like a rooftop. Tremendous description in the text, by the way. I love that. The immeasurable roof whose central pillar rose out of the shadows beyond their view, belching forth a great fume.
But they hear a familiar but very unexpected sound, the sound of running water, which we've talked a lot about their need for water. Now, in the part we skipped, we learned that there's a sharp gully in the Ethel Duath. Now, those are the cliffs on their left as they head north, with water dripping.
Now, a quick note on this, by the way, going back once again to the Atlas, Karen Wynn Fonstad explains a bit about this geographic feature, saying that faulting probably produced the trough between the Ethel Duath and the Morgai, through which the hobbits crept north from Cirith Ungol. Then she adds that transverse faults were apparent too, for Sam and Frodo drank from a gully that appeared to have been cloven by some huge axe. So she's actually bringing in some real life geological things to help explain the nature of the terrain here.
Mm-hmm. And we see the sad journey of these droplets, sweet rain, sunlit seas, but falling into Mordor.
Yeah, sadly, these drops drew the short straw.
Yeah. And it's a short journey, too. The little trickle runs across the path, turns, and disappears into the rocks there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll run across the path, turn, and disappear into the rocks here for just a moment during the break, and we'll come right back. Now, we'll get back to Frodo and Sam having found water. I know they're thirsty, but we've got stuff to talk about, right, Matt? So, sorry, guys, you're going to have to wait. First, we want to remind you there's a lot more talk going on at the Prancing Pony podcast than just us.
The PPP has an amazing listener community. They're always coming up with great questions and discussions across all our social media spaces. Check out our common room on Facebook, our dedicated subreddit, Twitter, and more.
Now, on Facebook, just look for the Prancing Pony podcast. Follow the page to get the news, but you're going to want to join the group for some great discussions.
Or if you prefer Reddit, find us there at r/prancingponypod. On Twitter and Instagram, we're simply at Prancing Pony Pod. And if you want daily Tolkien content, check out Today's Tolkien Times on YouTube and all your favorite podcast apps.
That's right. It's my new short format daily show. We do everything from, Tolkien Tuesdays and Word Nerd Wednesdays to Fandom Fridays. A lot of fun stuff. Be sure to check it out at youtube.com/@TolkienTimes and follow @TolkienTimes on all your social media. And folks, if you enjoy this show, please do consider supporting us by joining the Fellowship of the Podcast. It's what helps me be able to make the show better every season. And when you join, you get the best Discord community around. And that includes some live episode recordings and hangouts every month, episode postscripts, ad-free episodes, and a whole lot more.
You also can become a part of our Questions After Nightfall episodes, or even join us as a guest in the North Wing. So please go to patreon.com/prancingponypod to show your support and join the Fellowship of the Podcast.
And you can always help us out by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, as well as a rating over on Spotify. And please recommend us to your friends. Now, I want us to go ahead and get back to the chapter. So Matt, would you pick up where I left off?
Absolutely. Sam sprang towards it. "If I ever see the lady again, I will tell her," he cried. "Light and now water." Then he stopped. "Let me drink first, Mr. Frodo," he said. "All right, but there's room enough for two." "I didn't mean that," said Sam. "I mean, if it's poisonous or something that will show its badness quick, well, better me than you, master, if you understand me." "I do. But I think we'll trust our luck together, Sam. Or our blessing. Still, be careful now, if it's very cold." The water was cool but not icy, and it had an unpleasant taste, at once bitter and oily, or so they would have said at home. Here it seemed beyond all praise, and beyond fear or prudence. They drank their fill, and Sam replenished his water bottle. After that, Frodo felt easier, and they went on for several miles, until the broadening of the road and the beginnings of a rough wall along its edge warned them that they were drawing near to another Orkhold. "This is where we turn aside, Sam," said Frodo, "and we must turn east." He sighed as he looked at the gloomy ridges across the valley. "I have just about enough strength left to find some hole away up there, and then I must rest a little." The riverbed was now some way below the path. They scrambled down to it and began to cross it. To their surprise, they came upon dark pools fed by threads of water trickling down from some source higher up in the valley. Upon its outer marges, under the westward mountains, Mordor was a dying land. But it was not yet dead, and here things still grew, harsh, twisted, bitter, struggling for life.
Kind of like this podcast. Oh, man. All right. Here's the thing. There may not be a lot of water, and we're not sure about it, but it is water, and Sam is over the moon about it. And he goes back to that hypothetical wish, right, for Galadriel to bring them light and water. He's won the lottery. Yeah.
Yeah, because the light came in the last episode when it became clear that things were changing in the world.
Right.
Yes. Now, Sam said there, the winds change, something's happening. He's not having it all his own way. His darkness is breaking up out in the world there.
That's right. And he recognized that light as being part of what he wished for. He even said, "I've got one thing I wanted, a bit of light, enough to help us."
Yeah. But he says something that Frodo misunderstands.
Yeah.
He tells Frodo to let him drink first, and this throws Frodo. After all, there's lots of room to drink here.
Yeah, it's a big place, man. Not a problem. But of course, that isn't Sam's point. He's trying to explain to Frodo real briefly, what if it's poisonous? What if it's nasty in some other way? Look, the quest honestly could continue without Sam, but it really can't continue without Frodo. I mean, yeah, it almost did back when Sam thought Frodo was dead and he took the ring and all of that. But let's be honest, Frodo's got the better chance.
Yeah. Now, Frodo, for his part, he's not having it. He says, we're going to do this together for good or ill.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I want to talk a little bit here before we move on about Sam's willingness to sacrifice. Mm-hmm. I think that's a huge thing, and we see that throughout the text. But also Frodo's decision here, because let's be honest, after all, if Sam dies, we talked about Frodo, being the more likely to make it. But if Sam dies, Frodo doesn't make it, right? When he gets attacked by Gollum later, he's done for. It's over. So it does take both of them to get there, even if hypothetically Frodo's the one who could, in theory, do better. Let's talk about this. First, let's talk about Sam's willingness to sacrifice.
Yeah, not to mention Sam carrying Frodo for part of the journey.
Quite literally, yes, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, it adds further to why everyone loves Sam and why he's the great hero that he is.
total dedication, right?
Yes, this is a very short passage, but it seems pretty instant that Sam's mind goes to like, it's not even a question to him, like, hey,
No.
I'm your taste tester. You're the most important person.
He doesn't even think, oh, I wonder, we're in Mordor. I wonder if it's poisonous. I guess I better drink first. He just immediately goes to that.
Yeah. He immediately goes to it. No questions asked.
It's just another indication that his nature, like who he is, how he sees himself, is as the protector of Frodo, as the one to dedicate his being to ensuring Frodo's security, Frodo's safety. Hey, we saw it back in the Tower of Cirith Ungol in terms of risking everything to try to find Frodo. When he had the ring, he could have just continued on with the quest, to try to get the ring to Mount Doom, knowing that Frodo has been captured. Arguably, that's a good decision, but I'm glad he didn't make it. I'm glad he went to rescue Frodo. Yeah, that's definitely just who Sam is. I mean, that's
absolutely
through and through, even though this is just such a simple example of that.
Yeah.
But Frodo's decision is interesting here too. He doesn't know that if Sam dies, he's not going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
I think, though, he knows that if Sam dies, it's going to be a hard job.
It's going to be harder. Yeah.
We don't see a lot of this, but I think Sam sees himself as beneath Frodo, right? As Frodo's his master, and he's the guy who's the servant. He's the one who needs to kind of carry the weight. I think for Frodo's, from his perspective, he sees Sam much more as a peer than Sam sees Frodo, if that makes sense. And especially now, maybe less so at the beginning of the journey, to be fair. But I think more so the farther in we get.
It's clear for a while now that Frodo sees the value of Sam more than Sam sees the value of Sam, even though
that is fair.
It's like, you took on a giant freaking spider, man. Like, give yourself some credit here. You're pretty important.
Well, the whole idea of, Frodo wouldn't make it very far without his Sam.
Yeah.
And Sam really struggled with that. Like, oh, don't say that,
Right.
But that's very true. And Frodo recognizes
so
that.
Humble and modest, that Sam.
He really is. And I don't think it's a false humility in any way. It may be a humility born out of his station. I mean, it's clear he's sort of very oriented to this sort of class standing. I mean, you think back even to his sort of guilt feeling at learning how to read. He talks about how his dad is like, Bilbo has learned him his letters, not meaning any worse for it, like he sort of feels like it's out of his league to even learn how to read, right? He's like, that's not the class to which I was born. My job is to serve you, Frodo. And he keeps that humility all the way through. But yeah. If Sam dies, Frodo doesn't make it. And I think Frodo recognizes that even if Sam doesn't.
Right. Yes.
But is the water poisonous?
No. It is not, but so it is cold. It's not freezing, but it's not. Yeah, it's not dangerously cold.
It's coming from the Ephel Duath, which is a much higher range. We're going to get to that later, where we actually talk about the heights, the relative heights of these mountain ranges. But even though it's not dangerously cold, its taste does leave a lot to be desired. This isn't. Let's put this in terms of bottled water, folks. This isn't Fiji or Aqua Panna. This is Dasani. Okay. And there goes my sponsorship deal. I guess I'm done for, but can we just be honest here? Dasani's the bottled water. Yeah.
I mean, you would take any water, I think, at this point.
Yeah. Crystal Geyser would take well over Dasani, but yes, I would take Dasani even over this oily water in Mordor.
Yes. Yeah. But it's palatable at least. And so beyond all praise here in these circumstances.
Kind of like at an airport when Dasani is okay, I guess.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, when it's all you got, right? So they drink and they replenish their one water bottle. And that's important. Remember, Frodo's water skin was slashed by the orcs in the Tower of Cirith.
Now, understandably, Frodo feels a bit better now. And so I would imagine does Sam. And they keep going north on the road. Yeah. Now, then they see that the road is widening and that there's even a bit of a wall along the edge of it. This infrastructure improvement suggests they're getting near to a fortress or some other orc stronghold.
It sure does. Now, Frodo, once again, still very much in the lead, we're going to see this pretty much going forward, says it's time to cross the Morgai and head east. But here's the thing. He knows he can't go too far at the moment, right? We got to go that direction. Maybe we can get up to that ridge, get up a little bit, find a place to rest. And so they get off the path and they head down to that dry riverbed.
And it's no longer along the path, it's below it.
Right.
And
right.
as they crossed it, they're shocked to see little pools of water.
Yeah. Got to be thinking seems so unlikely in Mordor.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Now, we're told by the narrative that even though this part of the land is dying, it's not quite completely dead yet.
It's only mostly dead. I mean, come on, Matt. You knew that was coming. You had to know that was coming. Mostly. By the way, marges, that word marges, M-A-R-G-E-S, that's just a fancy way of saying edges or margins, which is interesting because it actually sounds like the two words combined, right?
Yes.
You take the prefix from margins and the suffix from edges, but that is what it means.
And in the part that we skipped, we see exactly how unpleasant the life that remains here is. We've got low, scrubby trees, coarse bits of grass, withered mosses, tangled brambles, and maggot-ridden buds with flies.
Okay, and these flies are something special. Let's talk about these a little bit. First off, just so you know, the word dun is just a dull brownish gray. So the fact that these things are, described as being of different colors like dun or gray or black. So we're talking about a dull brown gray or black. It's not like there's a really big rainbow of fruit flavors here. Yeah.
Yes. Now, what do you make of the fact that they're marked like orcs?
That's what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
What is up with that?
Now, is this coincidence or is Sauron somehow manipulating all of life here?
A red eye-shaped blotch does feel a little bit more than purely coincidental.
Right? Yeah.
I have to say this feels like an effect. Now, whether Sauron intended that or whether this is just a side effect of his deeply powerful malevolence, that I don't know that I can speak to. I don't know that there's evidence either way. I was about to say I can't see him as that level of a micromanager, but actually I can, right? I mean, if we think about Melkor and Sauron, Melkor just wanted to burn everything.
Right.
Melkor was ticked at the existence of being, right? He was a nihilist. Sauron really is this orderly guy who wants things a particular way. He's the most annoying guy who wants things a particular way because he's so powerful and nasty and evil. But he kind of is this micromanager level guy, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's the kind of guy who might say, I want my flies to have an eye as well. Everything needs to have my eye.
It's branding. It is
branding.
what it is. Yeah.
He's even branded his flies.
Yeah.
I can see that working.
You want to walk in, no matter where you walk into Mordor, you want to be like, yep, this is Sauron's place.
You started with the wrong premise. No matter where you walk into Mordor, and one does not simply walk into Mordor, Matt.
I mean, I didn't say it would be easy, but clearly that's exactly what Frodo
true.
and Sam did. So
Frodo and Sam have walked into Mordor. They kind of stumbled and fell, chased by a spider into Mordor. But yeah, they didn't exactly drop in. They didn't ride horses in. They weren't carried by the eagles. So yeah.
The key word is simply walk into Mordor. Like, yes, we get it. It's not simple.
We've all misinterpreted Boromir's line. We've always thought it is one does not merely, walk into Mordor. And he's saying, no. One can walk into Mordor, but one never. It won't be simple.
Yes.
That's right. It will be challenging, complex, and difficult. Yes, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
It is creepy that these flies have the eye of Sauron on them. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
And one suspects that those annoying midges, and can we just be honest that midges are some of the most annoying critters in all of existence?
Yes.
So we've got these eye of Sauron flies. I bet if you could put these midges under an electron microscope, you'd probably see an eye of Sauron on them somewhere. They're just too tiny to see with the naked eye, but man, those things are annoying.
Now, Sam quite understandably complains about the stinging flies, the midges, etc.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's Sam, right? I mean, he kind of complains about some things, yeah.
I mean, you got to keep, just in case anyone was in doubt whether Sam was having a fun time. He's got to let you know. Speaking of having a fun time, Alan, why don't you get into reading the next bit here?
All right. Nicely done, sir. I'm going to skip a paragraph, and then we're going to get into what I think is one of the most beautiful bits of prose in the Legendarium. At least it moves me every time. There they sat and made such a meal as they could, keeping back a precious lembas for the evil days ahead. They ate the half of what remained in Sam's bag of Faramir's provision, some dried fruit and a small slip of cured meat, and they sipped some water. They had drunk again from the pools in the valley, but they were very thirsty again. There was a bitter tang in the air of Mordor that dried the mouth. When Sam thought of water, even his hopeful spirit quailed. Beyond the Morgai, there was the dreadful plain of Gorgoroth to cross. "Now you go to sleep first, Mr. Frodo," he said. "It's getting dark again. I reckon this day is nearly over." Frodo sighed and was asleep almost before the words were spoken. Sam struggled with his own weariness, and he took Frodo's hand, and there he sat silent till deep night fell. Then, at last, to keep himself awake, he crawled from the hiding place and looked out. The land seemed full of creaking and cracking and sly noises, but there was no sound of voice or of foot. Far above the Ephel Duath in the west, the night sky was still dim and pale. There, peeping among the cloud rack above a dark tor high up in the mountains, Sam saw a white star twinkle for a while. The beauty of it smote his heart as he looked up out of the forsaken land, and hope returned to him. For like a shaft, clear and cold, the thought pierced him that in the end, the shadow was only a small and passing thing. There was light and high beauty forever beyond its reach. His song in the tower had been defiance rather than hope, for then he was thinking of himself. Now, for a moment, his own fate, and even his master's, ceased to trouble him. He crawled back into the brambles and laid himself by Frodo's side, and putting away all fear, he cast himself into a deep, untroubled sleep. Oh, tears almost every time.
It's good stuff.
It really, really is.
Now, you had to skip a bit at the start, which is where we see that Frodo has reached his limit for the day.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they're not anywhere near the top, but it does not matter. Frodo has to rest.
He's just done. Remember, just a few hours ago, he was being tortured by the orcs. So, yeah, I think it's okay that he may not have as much physical stamina as Sam does here.
Yeah, we can cut him some slack. Now, there's really no place for even a small critter to hide, so they end up under some brambles that are hanging over the face of a rock wall.
Doesn't sound very comfortable, but yeah,
No.
you hide where you can hide. And then back to where I got to read. They do have something more to eat this time. They forego the limbus, though, knowing that it's going to be needed soon, and instead they have a good bit of the food that Faramir gave them. Now, he gave them that food 6 days ago on March 9th, but fortunately it's dried fruit and cured meat, so it's lasted. It's good journey food.
They drank as well, being very thirsty still. It seems that Mordor's very air dried them out.
Yeah, I imagine it's quite, I mean, the ash in the air, sort of, and certainly there's not going to be a lot of humidity. It's a very dry place. It's desert in the first place. Yeah.
I would not go there if you have asthma, folks.
No,
stay
bad
clear.
idea.
Now, this realization makes Sam afraid of what it'll be like getting to Mount Doom, which is interesting, as he looks ahead here.
He wonders, okay, I don't know exactly how far it is, but I know it's not close. I've seen the mountain from the Tower of Cirith from the platform there at the top, looking out and getting that view. I know it's a long way off. Yes, we've come further north, so maybe it's a little closer. We'll find out later about how far it is, but it is a long way to journey if you don't have access to water.
Yeah.
That is terrifying.
It's like this sucks already. Can you imagine
doing it with absolutely no water? Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, we can survive without food for a while. Hobbits can too, though I'm sure they're even more frustrated about it than you and I would, being used to so many meals a day. But water, you can't go very long without water. You'll die of thirst a lot sooner than you're going to die of starvation.
Yeah.
And the thought of trying to make that journey through a dry volcanic desert with only one water skin, terrifying. Yeah.
Now, Sam notices it's getting late, getting dark, and suggests Frodo take the first turn of sleep.
That's right. This day is nearly over, he says. This day, by the way, is still March 15th. And as we talked about last week, a lot has happened today. Theoden has died. Denethor has taken his own life. Éowyn and Merry are now in the Houses of Healing after slaying the Witch King together. Well, after Merry gave the assist and Éowyn got the kill. Aragorn's arrived to the Pelennor and helped turn the tides of battle there. So it's been a very, very eventful day, even for these guys, because they started the day escaping from the Tower of Cirith Ungol, breaking the will of the Watchers, having that wall crumble down just behind them, having the Nazgul shriek and call all the troops to go, find out what's going on here. They had to drop off a bridge. This has been a heck of a day.
Yeah, which is why Frodo concedes and he's asleep almost instantly.
Before the words are said, yeah.
Now, Sam, on the other hand, is fighting off sleep. He takes Frodo's hand again, very sweet, and sits quietly for hours as night comes.
How can he do this? We were just talking last week about the fact that he hasn't slept since the night before they went into Shelob's lair. He'd been up for 3 days straight prior to that very brief nap that he took earlier today at this point. I don't know about you. Fighting off sleep in silence and darkness is hard enough when you had a normal day after a normal night's sleep.
Yeah.
How hard must this be?
My secret to driving at night is sunflower seeds.
Oh, I've seen you nibble on those things.
Yeah. I crack some sunflower seeds and, those, because you're actively doing something.
Would you do that if you didn't have any water, though?
I know. That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, that would be bad because it would dry out your mouth. Yeah.
Make you thirsty, all that salt. Yeah.
I'd be pretty SOL in this situation, I think.
Yes, you will. Yes, you will.
Because, adrenaline can only take you so far. Like, at some point, your adrenaline has to subside. It's like
3 days. I can't imagine that it's still running. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know how he doesn't crash.
Got an adrenal gland the size of a horse,
Right? Yeah.
It's just pumping that stuff out. Yeah. Man, I don't know. For me, I don't know that I could fight off sleep in silence and darkness. I have to turn up the volume. Like you, the only time I can think of where I have to fight off sleep is when I'm driving.
Yeah.
And for me, the answer is to roll down the window, turn on some classic rock, and sing, right?
Yeah.
That keeps me awake, makes me cringe at my own singing, but at least it keeps me awake. Poor Sam doesn't have that option, right? He's got to do this in silence so Frodo can sleep. It's pitch dark. Right. As we'll see, there's not much in the way of stars tonight. Right. There's a little bit that he'll see later, but clearly there's a ton of cloud cover because we've talked about the volcano and the fumes that it's been putting out. So it's just a dark black night and he's trying to fight off sleep for hours. Kudos to Sam. I would have lasted 5 minutes.
Yeah, no kidding. Now, finally, just to keep himself awake, he crawls out from under the brambles and looks around.
That's right. And we get a bit first about what's nearby, right? The noises, not noises of orcs or people, thankfully. But wow, is that descriptive text or what? The creaking and cracking and sly noises?
Yeah.
Kind of makes me shudder a little bit. What's he hearing?
It's that unknown thing that, it's almost worse than the known.
Right.
One thing if he heard orcs, but hearing these weird, eerie noises is even worse in some way.
Terrifying stuff.
And as he looks west, Sam sees that the sky over the mountains of shadow is still less than pitch black. We arrive at one of the most beautiful moments in the Legendarium. Sam observing the star twinkle in the sky. And let's take some time and linger on this a bit here.
I think we need to. I think folks would be pretty upset if we didn't spend some time talking about this passage, right? Now,
first, we have the gorgeous prose, peeping among the cloud rack.
I love that line. And a rack here, folks, is simply a mass of high, thick, fast-moving clouds. The word comes to us from Middle English, and it is apparently of Scandinavian origin, at least according to Online Etymology Dictionary, one of my favorite sites. Old Norse wreck, R-E-K, means wreckage or jetsam, and Old English wreck, I think that's how to pronounce it, means to push, shove, or drive. So that's what we're talking about here, a rack of clouds, the cloud rack.
And then next we have the setting, above a dark tor high up in the mountains.
Now, a tor is a hill or rocky peak. And in this case, the word comes to us from Old English tor, T-O-R-R, and that's cognate with Gaelic tor, lofty hill or mound. Again, going back to that Online Etymology Dictionary, it does say, though, that sources disagree on whether the Celts borrowed it from the Anglo-Saxons or the other way around. I mean, clearly, they're the same spelling of the word, and they mean the same thing. Ultimately, though, it may be from Latin turris, high structure, which is actually the root from which we get the word tower. So tower and tor are related there.
Then we get what it does. The beauty of it smote Sam's heart.
Oh.
Such a contrast here in the dark of Mordor, and it returns hope to Sam.
Oh, I love that. And that's where I really want to stop for a second and talk about why this star, brings hope to Sam. And for this, I want to go to Appendix A, specifically the bit where Tolkien talks about the three unions of the Eldar and the Edain.
Before we get to Aragorn and Arwen, we read about the earlier of these unions, Luthien and Beren, and Tuor and Idril. Now, Idril and Tuor's son is Earendil. He, in turn, married Elwing, the granddaughter of Luthien and Beren, who had the Silmaril that Beren had taken from the crown of Morgoth.
So now we have Earendil and Elwing, and that's when we read this. Earendil wedded Elwing, and with the power of the Silmaril, passed the shadows and came to the uttermost west, and, speaking as ambassador of both elves and men, obtained the help by which Morgoth was overthrown. Earendil was not permitted to return to mortal lands, and his ship bearing the Silmaril was set to sail in the heavens as a star and a sign of hope to the dwellers in Middle-earth, oppressed by the great enemy or his servants.
The footnote to this passage references a couple of important moments, including the moment when Sam and Frodo used the Phial of Galadriel just last chapter as they escaped from the Tower of Cirith Ungol while crying out, Aya Elenion Ankalima, Hail brightest of stars, a reference to Earendil.
That's right. But it also lists this moment in the footnote. We aren't just speculating that this is Earendil based on the importance of hope or on the fact that it's in the western sky shortly after sunset like Venus always is when it's visible. We have receipts. This is Earendil. So let's go back to the Silmarillion when Earendil first sailed the skies as a star. Now, when first Vingalot, that was Earendil's ship, was set to sail in the seas of heaven, it rose unlooked for, glittering and bright, and the people of Middle-earth beheld it from afar and wondered, and they took it for a sign and called it Gil Estel, the star of high hope. Then the elves looked up and despaired no longer, but Morgoth was filled with doubt. Aha!
Okay, now back to the star and how it's impacting Sam here.
Yeah.
It reminds him of the temporary nature of the shadow and the permanence and unreachable by darkness of light and high beauty.
Now, I want to talk about that a little bit. How is this idea of the temporary nature of the shadow, the permanence of light and high beauty? Let's talk about how this is compatible with another idea that we see in Tolkien, which is this idea of the long defeat, sort of the inevitability of defeat, right? We see this back and forth. Talk to me a little bit about that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think on the surface, those might seem to contradict, each other at a surface reading, I suppose.
How is there light and beauty forever beyond the reach of the darkness? And yet at the same time, there's a long defeat and there's inevitably we're going to die.
What immediately comes to my mind is, this idea of a long defeat, it still is working toward a greater victory ultimately in the end. So basically it all comes down to Iluvatar, I think, for me. Is that
okay, so you're talking about the very end when Arda Mard becomes Arda Remade.
Yes.
And, okay.
So yes, I mean, there's a long defeat. And we know too that the long defeat is specifically, when it comes up in Lord of the Rings, it's referring to the elves.
That's a good point, right? I mean, it comes out of Galadriel and Celeborn, and they're talking about the long defeat. But in fairness, I think they're talking about the fact that the elves are going to have to leave one way or the other, right?
Yes.
Either the One Ring is destroyed and they lose their power and fade away, or the One Ring is not destroyed and they get killed. They get just dominated.
Right.
So either way, they're in a little bit of trouble, and they've been fighting that long defeat for so long. They have to surrender to men, even in the best of cases. Yeah. That's a good point. I do like that, the idea of, that we are eventually building up to that final and permanent victory of these eternal concepts, right? Light and high beauty. And that's the thing. The long defeat is specifically about them and about the elves. The fact that light and high beauty are these concepts, are these abstract things that are above and out of the reach of the shadow. And I think that actually, now that I think about it, this sort of harkens back to Tolkien's Boethian thinking, right? This idea that evil is not a thing in and of itself, of equal power, of equal substance to good. Evil is simply an absence of good. Darkness is simply an absence of light. The closest we get to anything outside of that realm of thinking is Ungoliant, when she spins that unlight that seems to have a darkness of its own. That's as close as we get to sort of this Manichaean viewpoint where evil and good are of the same ability, that they have the same equal power. This definitely harkens back to that Boethian idea of darkness being simply the absence of light. And I think that's really where we're going. And that's why it, at its root, leads back to what you talked about, which is the idea of an eventual victory of Arda remade.
Yes.
Yeah, man. Mentioning Ungoliant also reminded me this idea of light that cannot be touched or permanently defeated by evil. Yes, she cast an unlight, but she made that unlight from light itself, because she'd sucked up all the light of the trees and then she spewed it back in this form of darkness. But even then, she still wasn't successful in destroying all of the light of the trees. The only reason we have the sun and moon is because they are each a fruit of the trees. The moon is a fruit of Telperion, and the sun is a fruit of Laurelin. And then, of course, at the end, when Arda is remade, we get the restoration of the trees by the breaking of the Silmarils. Ungoliant's actions don't end up changing the eternal. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So much out of this passage, huh?
Yes. Yeah.
I love this. It's so meaningful, so rich. Really is.
Now, going back to the text here, Sam recognizes now that when he sang that song in the tower, in literal and metaphorical darkness, it wasn't necessarily hope, it was just stubbornness. It was a refusal to give in and concede, but it wasn't hope.
That's interesting. And yeah, I can look back at that and say, yeah, you're right. This was a little bit more of just, I'm not going to give in. I don't want to give in. I don't want this to be the end. That's especially true of the version that made the book that we actually read, because I don't know if you listened to those episodes yet, Matt, but the episodes that I did with Dawn, when we got to that moment, we actually looked at the draft, and there's a draft version of that was much darker. And it was basically Sam saying, am I going to see your face before we die? I mean, he was giving up hope for sure. And so I'm glad it was a little different in the text. But I think there's a reason why Sam can look back on that and say that was just stubbornness. It wasn't hope. He had only been thinking of himself. He'd had this narrow viewpoint, not selfishly. Sam's not by nature a very selfish person, but he is a little myopic. And I think that's what happened there. He'd only been thinking of himself. He hadn't been thinking about, well, he'd been thinking about Frodo, but he hadn't been thinking about Frodo in the context of the fate of the world, right?
Yes.
And how much this quest mattered. He was just thinking of Frodo on that personal level.
Yeah. But we see in this moment that Sam sees the bigger, almost eternal picture, the presence of a hope that cannot possibly be defeated.
Right. It's literally unreachable by darkness. And that confidence, that knowledge, that sort of glimpse of the eternal is what allows him to be untroubled by whatever happens to him or even to Frodo. Like, okay, the quest is unsuccessful. Frodo dies, I die, Sauron gets the ring, he dominates the world. There's still light. There's still this high beauty that is beyond the reach of Sauron, even if the quest fails and Sauron has the ring. Yeah, he'll cover the lands in a second darkness, as we read about, but he'll eventually get defeated somehow, some way, and Arda will be remade and there will be light and high beauty. And that eternal picture enables him to go back to Frodo, set aside that fear, and instead of staying up watching, he falls into that, I love the way it's described, deep, untroubled sleep. Probably for about 3 days. I mean, I don't know about you, but if I'm up for 3 days plus, I'm sleeping for more than 8 hours. What about you?
Yeah, no kidding.
Man. But let's go straight to the moment that they wake up. Hopefully it's no more than about 10 or 12 hours later. And Matt, I'm going to have you pick up exactly where I left off.
All right. They woke together hand in hand. Sam was almost fresh, ready for another day, but Frodo sighed. His sleep had been uneasy, full of dreams of fire, and waking brought him no comfort. Still, his sleep had not been without all healing virtue. He was stronger, more able to bear his burden one stage further. They did not know the time nor how long they had slept, but after a morsel of food and a sip of water, they went on up the ravine, until it ended in a sharp slope of screes and sliding stones. There the last living things gave up their struggle. The tops of the Morgai were grassless, bare, jagged, barren as a slate. After much wandering and search, they found a way that they could climb, and with a last 100 feet of clawing scramble, they were up. They came to a cleft between two dark crags, and passing through found themselves on the very edge of the last fence of Mordor. Below them, at the bottom of a fall of some 1,500 feet, lay the inner plain stretching away into a formless gloom beyond their sight. The wind of the world blew now from the west, and the great clouds were lifted high, floating away eastward, but still only a gray light came to the dreary fields of Gorgoroth. There smokes trailed on the ground and lurked in hollows, and fumes leaked from the fissures in the earth. Still far away, 40 miles at least, they saw Mount Doom, its feet founded in ashen ruin, its huge cone rising to a great height, where its reeking head was swathed in cloud. Its fires were now dimmed, and it stood in smoldering slumber, as threatening and dangerous as a sleeping beast. Behind it there hung a vast shadow, ominous as a thundercloud, the Vales of Barad-dûr, that was reared far away upon a long spur of the Ashen Mountains, thrust down from the north. The dark power was deep in thought, and the eye turned inward, pondering tidings of doubt and danger, a bright sword, and a stern and kingly face it saw. And for a while it gave little thought to other things, and all its great stronghold, gate on gate and tower on tower, was wrapped in a brooding gloom.
Oh, man. And again with the alliteration, like stuff I didn't recognize when I was building the outline, but wow. Stood in smoldering slumber, sleeping, dimmed, dangerous. Oh, this is just incredible stuff. Absolutely. Dark power, deep in thought, tidings of doubt and danger. Oh, beautiful, beautiful passage. Let's go back, though, to the beginning of what you read. We start with another of these wonderfully tender moments as Frodo and Sam wake up hand in hand. Love that.
While Sam here feels rejuvenated, Frodo is less so.
Yeah.
Turns out he had terrible dreams and didn't feel a whole lot better after waking.
And I imagine, in a place like this, that's probably par for the course, especially when you've got the ring around your neck. And I also can't help but think that this is something that Tolkien himself would have experienced in World War I, where people are going to get sleep, but they're not always going to wake up rejuvenated. And, in this case, Sam does, but Frodo doesn't. And that's likely the kind of thing that he would have seen where some do and some don't because they've had these terrible, terrible dreams. But, Frodo was at least physically restored a little bit. They have a bite of something to eat and they keep climbing up the gully that they'd begun to go up yesterday.
And the gully, it comes to its end in a bunch of loose stones, and that's what a scree is.
Right. And now, of course, as we get to this, slope of loose stones, we see the end of even any semblance of life, right? Everything's given up. The coarse grasses and withered mosses, they're done. They're like, no, this place, I'm out.
Yeah, they eventually find their way to a spot that they can climb to the ridge of the Morgai. After all, they can't climb up a slope of loose stones.
No, they do have to move a little away from there to get up, yeah.
And they scramble their way to the top of the Morgai, looking down on Mordor.
Now, here we get an explicit mention of elevation. It is about 1,500 feet, the text says, that's about 460 meters, down to the plateau of Gorgoroth. So the Morgai are less than 1/3 of the height of the passes of the Efelduath.
Yeah. So how do we reach that conclusion? We'll read in the next chapter Mount Doom itself. The confused and tumbled shoulders of its great base rose for maybe 3,000 feet above the plain, and above them was reared half as high again its tall central cone. So the total height of Mount Doom is about 4,500 feet, or about 1,300 or so meters.
Yeah, closer to 1400. But yeah, just before that, we read that Sam saw now that Mount Doom was less lofty than the high passes of the Ephel Duath, which he and Frodo had scaled. Okay, so if Mount Doom is 4,500 feet and the high passes of the Ephel Duath were even higher than that, so the pass of Cirith Ungol might have been closer to, say, 5,000 feet instead of 4,500 feet. So that'd be a little over 1,500 meters. And so that would make the mountains 3 times as tall as the Morgai. So the Ephel Duath is at least 3 times as high.
And even though the wind is in the west and the light is winning, not much of that light makes its way here where Frodo and Sam are.
No.
And we find the land here is described in a way that one would expect from an actively volcanic area.
For good reason. So at the heart of this land of darkness is Oradruin itself, Mount Doom, which Frodo and Sam see standing alone on the plateau, its cone hidden in the low clouds. Now, the text tells us that it's at least 40 miles away, which is about 64 kilometers.
Of course, Frodo and Sam won't just travel 40 miles to get there.
Sadly, no.
Like we said, the long way round is the story. Is the story that pops up a lot. Also, in an older version of the text, it was still 30 miles away, perhaps due east from where the hobbits stood. Then it was 7 leagues or more, which is only 21 miles.
That's right. Now, Christopher Tolkien explains in Sauron Defeated, which is volume 9 of the History of Middle-earth, that it is impossible to relate 30 miles, still less 7 leagues, to any of the maps. On the second map, the distance due east from the Morgai to Mount Doom, in its second, more westerly position, is just under 50 miles, while on the third map, the last general small-scale map that my father made, it became 80 miles. On the large-scale map of Rohan, Gondor, and Mordor, the distance is somewhat under 60 miles, as Mount Doom was first placed. But when it was moved further to the west, it became about 43 miles. Under 40 in my redrawing of the map published in The Return of the King, with which the text agrees. So, a lot of work on that.
Yeah, and as we make our way into next chapter and the various legs of Frodo and Sam's journey, we'll talk about distances and go back to this note on the geography that Christopher includes in Sauron Defeated.
We will, and we'll probably also reference Fonstad's Atlas a lot as well. This description, though, I've got to say, as threatening and dangerous as a sleeping beast, just is so a quiet malevolence. You really don't want it to notice you. This is a really scary place. And then we also get that description of the shadow that veils Barad-dûr, which is even further to the east, right? It's on a spur of the mountains. When the text says it's on a spur of the Ashen Mountains, we're talking about the east-west range that forms the northern edge of Mordor, and that it has a spur running to the south, and at the south end of that spur is where Barad-dûr is built, and that is even further to the east of Mount Doom.
And then we get a narrative description far beyond in the distance from where Frodo and Sam are, and we get basically what's on Sauron's mind. He's worried and he's fearful. He's seen Aragorn in the Palantir holding a sword with which he is all too familiar. And as a result, he's not thinking about much else at this moment.
Which is exactly one of the reasons why Aragorn did what he did, and we'll get to that. But I want to start by going back to Book 5, Chapter 2. This is the passing of the Grey Company. And Aragorn explains, in this case to Legolas and Gimli, I spoke no word to him, and in the end I wrenched the stone to my own will. That alone he will find hard to endure. And he beheld me, but in other guise than you see me here. If that will aid him, then I have done ill. But I do not think so. To know that I lived and walked the earth was a blow to his heart, I deem, for he knew it not till now. Sauron has not forgotten Isildur and the sword of Elendil. Now, in the very hour of his great designs, the heir of Isildur and the sword are revealed, for I showed the blade reforged to him. He is not so mighty yet that he is above fear. Nay, doubt ever gnaws him.
That's good stuff.
Doubt ever gnaws him. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, then in Book 5, Chapter 9, The Last Debate, Aragorn is explaining to Gandalf one of the reasons he did this. I deemed that the time was ripe and that the stone had come to me for just such a purpose. It was then 10 days since the ring bearer went east from Rauros, and the Eye of Sauron, I thought, should be drawn out from his own land.
Perfect. So the fact that Frodo and Sam can be where they are without Sauron catching them, so to speak, is in large part due to Aragorn's decision to look into the stone and to threaten him all the way back then, 10 days after Frodo and Sam left. Finally, though, I want to quote Hammond and Scull here from the Reader's Companion. They actually bring together a few other circumstances to explain Sauron's brooding thoughts here. It is 10 days since Aragorn revealed himself in the Palantir. But since then, Sauron has seen his army defeated on the Pelennor fields and the Witch King annihilated, and according to Gandalf, probably thinks that Aragorn is now the wielder of the ring. No wonder he's not thinking about Frodo and Sam.
Yeah.
No wonder he's not thinking about somebody trying to sneak into Mordor to destroy the ring. It's the last thing he could possibly conceive.
Yeah. And I got to admit, that would make me maybe a bit moody and distracted too if I was a world-dominating seeking Dark Lord searching for that one piece of missing jewelry.
That's right. I got to get that one piece for my set. Yeah.
Now, we've got one more bit of reading. Alan, you want to do the honors?
I do. I don't like the look of things at all, said Sam. Pretty hopeless, I call it. Saving that where there's such a lot of folk, there must be wells or water, not to mention food. And these are men, not orcs, or my eyes are all wrong. Neither he nor Frodo knew anything of the great slave-worked fields away south in this wide realm, beyond the fumes of the mountain, by the dark, sad waters of Lake Nordenen, nor of the great roads that ran away east and south to tributary lands, from which the soldiers of the tower brought long wagon trains of goods and booty and fresh slaves. Here in the northward regions were the mines and forges and the musterings of long-planned war, and here the dark power, moving its armies like pieces on the board, was gathering them together. Its first moves, the first feelers of its strength, had been checked upon its western line, southward and northward. For the moment it withdrew them, and brought up new forces, massing them about Cirith Gorgor for an avenging stroke. And if it had also been its purpose to defend the mountain against all approach, it could scarcely have done more. Well, Sam went on, whatever they have to eat and drink, we can't get it. There's no way down that I can see, and we couldn't cross all that open country crawling with enemies, even if we did get down. Still, we shall have to try, said Frodo. It's no worse than I expected. I never hoped to get across. I can't see any hope of it now. But I've still got to do the best I can. Present, that is to avoid being captured as long as possible. So we must still go northwards, I think, and see what it is like where the open plain is narrower. I guess what it'll be like, said Sam. Where it's narrower, the orcs and men will just be packed closer. You'll see, Mr. Frodo. I dare say I shall, if we ever get so far, said Frodo, and turned away. Frodo, you could just smell the sort of absolute, it's not even desperation, this is resignation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we had to skip the first paragraph in the reading, but we definitely want to talk about it.
Oh,
First,
yeah.
the Hobbit's reaction, loathing and wonder.
That's an interesting mix, isn't it?
It is.
Loathing
It really
and
is.
wonder. Yeah.
Yeah. And it must have been an incredible, breathtaking sight, and yet terrifying and completely evil at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, to see how evil can shape an entire land must have been overwhelming in a way.
It had to have been. I mean, especially when you think about where they came from. I mean, this land is dead. It's a volcanic wasteland. It's a choking desert. They come from a green, fertile land. I mean, they love farming, right? So they're wondering how in the world this land could possibly sustain the vast armies that Sauron must have.
In the prologue, we see that hobbits love peace and quiet and good-tilled earth. A well-ordered and well-farmed countryside was their favorite haunt.
Which might explain why they have no clue how this could possibly work.
Right.
But the text does later on give us an answer about how Sauron feeds his troops. So we'll wait to talk more about it when we get there. Speaking of vast armies, they can see Sauron's forces encamped as far as the eye can see, all the way down the edges of the Morgai towards the south.
And unfortunately, one of the biggest happens to be right beneath them. And it's big enough to have a grid of streets with huts and buildings and a road joining the main highway with lots of scurrying soldiers.
Keep in mind, folks, that Tolkien had experience with camps of soldiers, having been posted to several large camps during World War I. Hammond and Scull in particular suggest that this description recalls those situated in Staffordshire on Cannock Chase.
Of course, seeing all this doesn't give Sam a lot of hope now. Where's Eärendil when you need him, huh?
Yeah, sailing down in Vingalot to save the day, actually.
That's right.
Nice, yeah.
Though, Sam being Sam, he does find a silver lining. That many folk, there has to be food and water down there somewhere.
Good point. He also notes, interestingly, he throws it out there and then nothing happens with it, but it is interesting. These are men, right? So these are likely Southrons or Easterlings. These are not orcs. And that suggests that any food they might find is going to maybe be a bit more palatable. Certainly the water might be a little cleaner. Who knows? But it doesn't matter because they're not going to get there. And here the text breaks away from the Frodo-Sam conversation to explain a bit more about precisely how these men are fed.
Yeah, there are apparently fields in the southern part of Mordor around an inland sea called Lake Númenor.
Which, I mean, I don't know about you, but you played, was it Shadow of Mordor or Shadow of War, where we end up seeing all of that green land around the lake?
I think it's in Shadow of War. It's one of them.
I know it's one of them. I don't remember. I just can't remember if it's in the one that was like, and you get an Nazgul, and you get an Nazgul, and you get an Nazgul. And yeah, everybody's a Nazgul. Yeah. Anyway, that part aside, the reality of Lake Númenor, I want to take a second to go back again to Fonstad's Atlas regarding the idea that this land could be fertile. She talks about this. She says, the plateau of Gorgoroth was barren, and had all Mordor been of that formation, Sauron would have had little to feed his countless troops. But conditions were somewhat better in Lithlad, the Ash Plain. There, the flows of more solid material were apparently less, or were mostly eroded. If the rock were highly weathered, the resulting soil would have been quite fertile. In the semi-arid climate, water was in short supply, for the bitter sea of Númenor, with its interior drainage, was salty. Still, a recent deposition of ash, like you get from an eruption, would have helped with conservation, for ash is a highly effective mulch, reducing evaporation, allowing dry land farming on the great slave-worked fields. Interesting.
Yeah, the dry land farming is very, very interesting. Now, this fertile land will eventually be given to the slaves of Mordor by Elisar after he becomes king of Gondor. Now, We'll see that in The Steward and the King later this season.
Yeah, just a few chapters from now.
And we'll also see that there are highways to lands that pay tribute, food, treasure, and slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And up here in this part of Mordor is where we find the industry, mines and forges.
Exactly, as well as the military leadership. Sauron moving his pieces on the chessboard. And we get mention of the fact that, after this initial defeat of Sauron on the Pelennor, as well as the other places like Lorien and the north, he's putting together a larger force intended to crush Gondor once and for all, just as Gandalf and Aragorn have talked about in the last debate.
But that process of building up a massive army also happens to unintentionally prevent Frodo and Sam from making a straight shot for Mount Doom.
Sure does.
We see Sam states the obvious here. They might have food and water, but we can't get it, and we can't get down there to cross to Mount Doom.
Exactly. And Frodo's thought here, I talked about that resignation, like, well, gonna have to. It reminds me of what we saw in Frodo back at the Black Gate in Book 4. Now, after Gollum brings them to the Black Gate, and it looks as hopeless as can possibly be, Frodo says, I am commanded to go to the land of Mordor, and therefore I shall go. If there is only one way, then I must take it. What comes after must come. Right? That's fatalism, resignation. He's like, well, it's not up to me. I don't get to decide what happens to me. I only know I have to make this choice. I have to make the effort.
And after all, he's never had that much hope anyway. He's just got to try to do the best that he can. And of course, he's not so hopeless as to make the attempt here, saying that they should keep going north to see if maybe the plain is narrower.
And Sam just figures that means a higher population density. And so I have to ask you, Matt, why do you think a narrower plain may be more of a help to them? I'm trying to figure this out in my head. All right, let's go to where the plain is narrower. Why? Why would that help?
Yeah, it's kind of tricky. Like, why would that be advantageous
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe he thinks that, once we start on that plane, we have no chance of finding water.
That's a good point. Right. And we maximize the likelihood of being spotted. So
yeah,
it's not necessarily about the density or the population density of these camps so much as it is about minimizing the amount of time spent on the plane.
Yeah.
Maybe. If it was a really narrow plane, maybe you couldn't even build a camp, but that's
Right.
never going to be the case, right? He knows that even at its narrowest, the distance between the Morgai and Mount Doom is still vast.
Yeah. But maybe being on that open plane also puts you at more of a risk of being spotted.
Yeah.
I think you were alluding to that a little bit earlier.
It was.
So I don't think there's a definitive answer.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Folks, anybody who is listening to this, please feel free to send your input to barnum@theprancingponypodcast.com. Let us know what you think and why a narrower plane might be more of a help to Frodo and Sam. Now, those army camps with their dreary streets of huts and long, low, drab buildings, I wonder if one of those buildings might be a post office.
I bet it is.
Yeah.
I bet
what
it
does
is.
Bartleman have for us tonight, Matt?
Well, Jackson B. in Ontario writes in with a really interesting question. He'd been watching a talk at Oxenmoot from Jeremy Edmonds. Shout out to Jeremy of the Tolkien Collector's Guide. And Jeremy apparently was discussing whether the Valar were the authorities that the Lord of the Rings prologue mentions when summarizing the events of The Hobbit. The authorities, it is true, differ whether this last question was a mere question and not a riddle according to the strict rules of the game, but all agree that after accepting it and trying to guess the answer, Gollum was bound by his promise.
Okay.
So Jackson's question is this. If we assume this is true and the Valar themselves sat around and debated the outcome and legitimacy of the riddle game, how do you think that would play out? Who would take which side? What kind of arguments would different Valar provide? And what would be the outcome of that debate? Alan, this could get interesting.
Well, first off, I'm totally embarrassed to say that I did not catch Jeremy's talk. Though in fairness, I think it was something at like 2 or 3 in the morning for those of us who were attending in person because it was a West Coast talk. But it is a fun what if, so let's work with it. I'm going to start off by saying we already know what the outcome was. We don't need to speculate on that. The outcome was simple. All agree that after accepting it and trying to guess the answer, Gollum was bound by his promise. But I don't think that's the answer Jackson's looking for. So let's see how this might go. I'm going to start out with Ulmo. I think Ulmo starts out on Bilbo's side from the get-go. I mean, right, he's a bit of a rebel. He does not care what the rules explicitly say, right? Yeah. This is a guy who admitted to Tuor that he was a secret voice that gainsayeth, and that even though he may seem to oppose the will of his brethren, right, the other Valar, that is my part among them. In other words, I'm the guy who always does what nobody else is supposed to do, right? I'm the guy who breaks the rules. So I think he starts out in the minority, saying that it is, in fact, a riddle. He's definitely outvoted by Manwë and Varda. Both of them, I'm sorry to say this, they're sticklers. They are absolute sticklers. They are very keen on the rules. Varda's the one that Galadriel talks about. She raised up her hands and we were separated from Valinor, right? She's a stickler for the rules, and Manwë is definitely a stickler for the rules. He is like the ultimate rules guy. So I'm going to say they start out saying it's a mere question. Aule. Let's go to Aule next. I think he's fine with this being a riddle. I think to him, he's thinking, well, the thing in Bilbo's pocket is a crafted item, right? It's a ring. Even if it's Sauron's ring, it's something that was made by craft, out of gold, out of Aule's own substance. After all, Sauron was one of his Maiar. And Aule has a soft spot, not only for his Maiar, but for craftsmanship and things like that. So I think he, just because of what the answer to the riddle is, thinks it's a riddle. By the same token, and for the exact same reasons, his wife Yavanna votes no and makes Aule sleep in the workshop. So I think right now we're 3-2 in favor of it being a mere question and not a riddle. Tulkas doesn't help because he wonders why this was a game of questions and riddles and not a proper contest like wrestling. I mean, Tulkas smash. Why are they not fighting? They should solve this like men. Matt, what do you think about some of the others? We've got 3-2 with one abstention so far.
Yeah, so I'm looking over the names that you allotted for me to argue and make a case for here. Mandos. Now, he would kind of on the surface perhaps appear to be kind of a stickler, but, he did re-embody Beren and Luthien.
And he also knows fate. So he knows.
And he knows, at the end of the day, he knows the outcome. Anyway.
He knows that Gollum is going to have to, right. Yes, therefore, it must already be a riddle.
So I think we know where Mandos lies there.
Okay, so we're 3-3 with one abstention. All right.
Yeah. Lorien is an interesting one. Master of visions and dreams. So we don't get a whole lot from Lorien in the text to base this on. Yeah, I don't know if I would have an answer for him. Nienna, I think mercy comes into play. I think she's just beyond proud of the fact that Bilbo then goes on to spare Gollum's life. That's going to win her over if she was in doubt before that.
So now we're 4-3 in favor of being a riddle with two abstentions. Lorien and Tulkas. Okay.
You mentioned Ulmo kind of going against the grain a bit. You have to remember Orome does that a bit too.
That's true. That's true. He's way out there.
Yeah, he's way out there. He goes around hunting the monsters of Melkor. I kind of see him as almost like an Ulmo light, Diet Ulmo.
Diet Ulmo.
In his rebelliousness against his fellow Valar. Yeah, maybe I lean too heavily toward Bilbo on this as myself to look at this objectively, but Orome's a bit of a toss-up for me. I think if Ulmo is, if you're seeing Ulmo as a rebellious one going against the rest, I think Orome would be right behind him.
Okay. I can buy that. I don't know if we have even a clue as to where some of the others would stand. Some of the other, the Valier, right? Este, Vaira, Vanna, and Nessa are the other ones. Mm-hmm. And there's not a lot to say about any of them, unfortunately. Vaire the Weaver, again, because she's the Weaver and sort of weaves all of history into her webs, I think maybe she also would go with fine, it's a riddle. But I don't know about Vanna or Nessa or Este. There's not enough in the text for me to speculate. I do think that Manwë and Varda really hammer home, but this isn't a riddle, people. Yeah. And everybody else is like, I don't care. Almost like riddle schmiddle. That Gollum guy can't have, but of course they end up landing on the fact that it doesn't even matter what they decide. After he accepted it and started to try to guess the answer, Gollum was bound to do what he had promised to do, which of course he did not do.
Right.
Let's keep that in mind. Gollum's a liar, at least in the second edition of The Hobbit. In the first edition, he leads Bilbo out to an exit.
He's very cheerful about the whole proceedings.
Let us show you the door.
Let's go.
Oh, man. Good stuff. That is fun. I do love, I'm thinking, of course, of the statute of Finwë and Miriel and the debate of the Valar in that. I do love that because we really do get such great insight into the way the Valar think and the way they think through this with many of the times with compassion. They look to Finwë and they think, here's a guy who thought he was going to be married and, having kids,
right.
and he's only had the one son, and his wife has voluntarily chosen not to return.
Yeah.
And that's kind of shorted him. And so they allow him to get remarried. But then Matt's like, yeah, but some interesting things are going to happen as a result, guys. You may not. Are you sure you want to do this? But of course we are. I mean, you think about who the children of, but of course, then you think about what the children of Indus accomplished. I mean, they accomplished so much. So many of the Noldor that we look up to and admire were children and grandchildren of Indus, not of Miriel. Because Feanor, I mean, come on.
We don't, man. Yeah, gosh. Feanor as an only child? Would he be even worse as an only child?
Wow, he was spoiled enough as it was. Can you?
Right? Yeah. Goodness.
Man.
Sorry to all the only children out there.
Me included. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely, I'm not going to take offense at that. But yeah, Feanor as an only child is a terrifying thought. Oh, man. Well, I will say this. If he was an only child, the Noldor are a short-lived trunk of the Tree of Elves.
Yes.
I mean, Celebrimbor is about the only name going down 2 generations after that.
That's right.
Well, folks, that does wrap it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony podcast. We are off for 2 weeks for the winter holidays, but be sure to join us again on January 7th when Frodo and Sam listen in on a civilized conversation between 2 of Sauron's elite soldiers.
Is that what you're calling it?
Well, for now.
For now, okay. Folks, Alan and I want to thank the members of Team PPP, editor Jordan Rannells, Barlaman Becca Davis, social media manager Casey Hilsey, event and Patreon community coordinator Katie McKenna, graphic artist Megan Collins, and website guru Phil Dean.
Speaking of the website, please be sure to check it out at theprancingponypodcast.com. That's where you're going to find show notes and outtakes, Prancing Pony Ponderings, our online storefront where you can get all sorts of PPP merchandise, including the chapter art stuff from Megan. There's been some fantastic work over the last season and a half.
Absolutely. And you'll also want to visit our library page. The Prancing Pony Podcast is, after all, a podcast about the books. So if you're interested in a book we've mentioned on the show, like that Atlas of Middle-earth, perhaps,
absolutely,
you'll find a link for that in our library. And we do get a small amount of compensation when you make your purchase, and we thank you for that.
Indeed, we do. We also want to thank our patrons at the Kierdan's contribution tier. I'll start with DeMay in Alaska, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Paul in Colorado, Jerry in Texas, Joseph in Michigan, Kathy from North Carolina, Carlos in California, Brian in the UK, Ned from Connecticut, Jerry from Washington, Joe in Washington, Erwin from the Netherlands, Ben in Minnesota, Anthony in Texas, Karen in the UK, and Zaksu in Illinois.
There's also Sarah in New Jersey, Joshua in Massachusetts, Lucy in Texas, Erica in Texas, Carson in Oklahoma, Keith in Alabama, Vivian in California, James in Massachusetts, Anne in Kentucky, Sean in New Jersey, Mason in California, Maureen from Massachusetts, Christiana from Ohio, John from Japan, Olivia in London, Jackson in Tennessee, and Robert in Arizona. Thank you all so very much for your support.
Indeed, thank you very much.
Make sure you don't miss any episodes of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Subscribe now through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcast app.
And one last thing as always, don't forget to send your thoughts, comments, and most of all, what the zip code would be at that post office in Mordor to Barlaman at theprancingponypodcast.com. And if you want your voice literally heard, well, just send us audio of your question. Visit podinbox.com/prancingponypod and record your question for us.
Please be sure to still email the question to Barlaman, though. Even though Barlaman's been a lot more reliable lately, there's still a lot of mail to sort through. We'll try to get to you just as soon as we're able.
As always, though, this has been far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
This is the end. We are going. We are leaving now. Goodbye.